testing, 1, 2, 3, testing, 1, 2, 3, testing, 1, 2, 1, 2. Hey there, hi there, ho there. This is RHJunior, RHJunior Reality Check, coming to you live over the internet through a series of tubes known as the Boob Tube of YouTube, bringing you yet another broadcast of my personal little contribution to the internet, spleen squeezings. Yes, we're trying something new. We've got randomized backgrounds. Yes. It's a little thing. It's called Plane 9. Plane 9. It's a free downloadable program for Windows that creates it's basically supposed to be a screensaver creator. It randomizes stuff and creates these lovely images that you're seeing in the background now. Okay, I'm not sure whether I should leave what I should leave on. Or should I turn off the header? Turn off the header, give everybody a clear view of what we're watching here. Yeah. Let's turn it off. Okay. Yay. I don't know how clear this is coming through to y'all, because I can only see so much. It looks good. It looks good. YouTube is not receiving enough video. How much do I have to feed you people? This is ridiculous. Computers just arf. You know. I love arguing. You know, I have this like a third of a gallon of milk here, and I'm like, if I only had chocolate to go into it. The chocolate to milk ratio in my household is in constant flux. That's the thing that you know how it is. You buy enough peanut butter, but you never have enough jelly. You buy the jelly, you don't have the peanut butter. You want chocolate milk. You've got leftover chocolate syrup sitting in your refrigerator, but no milk. And then when you finally get milk, guess what? You ran out of chocolate syrup a week ago. Hey! But drinking my dairy products. I hate this song. I do. And for some reason, the randomizer always seems to land on it. Okay. I don't know where that came from. Don't know where it was going. Don't know what it was doing. I never know, and again, audio balance. If it's too loud, tell me. Really. Because I can't tell from here. Because it's deafening to me. No matter what I do to the volume control, it's just too loud for me. It goes from being barely audible to, hello, the audience is now deaf, Okay. So enjoy the tranquil, mellow, lava lamp-esque images whilst I blather incoherently. Waiting for a break, waiting for a confirmation. Waiting. I reflect often about the the nature of myself and the fact that I really am not pleased with what I've become, spiritually or emotionally or religiously or mentally, physically. I'm really not happy with it. This product stinks. Send it back and send another. That's how I feel about my own reflection. Uh, okay, I'm kind of worried about it. It's said that you test a person by putting them through adversity. Well, you test a person in two ways. One, by giving them adversity. Two, by giving them power. And I cannot really say that I am happy with the results that I've had with myself with either. Just really, really, really not. Analytics, stream health. The analytic device is it's supposed to be telling me whether the feed is healthy or unhealthy or whatever the heck. It's not doing anything. Uh, the video feed is sputtery. Uh, yeah, it says I'm not giving them enough video, but it's acting like I'm giving them too much. Explain this to me. I don't understand. Got a few things on my mind, random topics. I'm waiting for somebody to show up so that I can start talking with somebody. I hate to really start the show with an audio. I always start the show whenever I start the show because it's so random and I never really have a particular time that I'm supposed to be starting. And so it's everybody's guess as to whether I'm going to be online or not. So I end up talking to myself, and that's really boring. I supposedly have 160 followers, and I've never seen more than 10 at one time in this channel. So I don't know what to make of that. I really don't. That's the current time. Right here in River City. Pardon. 8:38 in the evening. It's dark. I'm considering starting up putting up a meter or something. It wouldn't make any difference. It really doesn't, because at the moment I don't have a lot of people. I really don't. So okay, we've got two people in channel. One of them's you. One of them's me. Who the heck are you? How are you liking the new backdrop? Well, actually, this is an old backdrop. I gave up on it because it's called Plane 9. It's a screensaver program. It's really nifty. You just look it up on Google, Plane 9, and PLANE number 9, and just Google it. You're on the internet. You know what to do. And it does this. Makes random screensavers, combining random effects, and it's nifty. I like it. And I'm using it as a backdrop for my broadcast because it's better than what I've been coming up with. So, but the thing of it is, I quit using it because I was worried because it was bogging down. I wasn't sure if it was too much for my computer to handle, so I stopped using it. Then I noticed no matter what I seem to do, it bogs down anyway. So, live streaming. Remember when YouTube was good? you know, I'm sorry. When a broadcast system like this, YouTube, a live streaming system should be like a telephone. You pick it up, it works. But it is the constant quote improvements they make to it have ended up making YouTube a pain in the ass to work with. The Trump impeachment business. I've been reading reports. Basically, says that Trump's lawyers are basically mopping the floor with the Democrats right now. Look, it was obvious from the beginning. Look, here's the deal. Here's what happened. This is what they're trying to impeach him for. Okay. Uh, President Trump found out that Biden's son or grandson was making shady deals in Hungary. Where was it? Hungary? Let's see. What is it? To Trump. Let me check this out. Trump impeachment Hungary? The Ukraine. Uh, Hungary or the Ukraine, whatever. Well, anyway, basically, he found out that Biden was doing some backdoor deals in Hungary, the Ukraine, and as is one of the president's duties. I've seen the legislature. I've read the rules. Basically, he's supposed to review this sort of thing, and to deal with foreign states that are engaged in, if they're engaged in criminal activity, he's supposed to, with American policy, he's supposed to investigate, and what it is that he told the government there, okay, hold on, something's going on with Biden and his offspring, and I want an investigation, and we're not going to be sending you any of America's, financial aid, because apparently they're on the receiving end of a regular financial aid package in that country, and we're not sending that aid until we get some investigation done, because this is crooked. Something's wrong here, and so the Democrats are throwing a temper tantrum, claiming that that Russia or the Ukraine, is, I don't know what exactly they're trying to, but basically they're trying to impeach him for investigating a crooked Democrat. Everybody knows what the song and dance is, except for some profoundly, willfully stupid people, who just sit there in front of their TV like a bunch of NPCs going, "Orange man bad, Orange man bad." It boils down to they're trying to impeach him for doing his job, and they've got nothing to stand on. And when they, they pushed it through the House of Representatives, just ramrodded it through, and then they got to the Senate, and then they started dragging their feet. This is not something you do when you think you have an open and shut case. Let's put it that way. They started dragging their feet, and they started trying to dictate terms as to how the Senate was to proceed with the impeachment. That's not how it's supposed to be done. Not according to federal or constitutional law. The House of Representatives does not dictate terms to the Senate, nor vice versa. But this chicanery, by and large, I think it's largely to cover up the whole Epstein affair, because this is ugly. I mean, Epstein was he was murdered to cover up his connection to countless powerful and influential figures who were showing up at his little parties and his little secret island hideaway for some kitty diddling, including people like the Clintons. And you know, and it's interesting every time the Democrats are in the crosshairs, all of a sudden there's an urgent new issue way over there. Yeah, and they're trying to get on his, and they're trying to throw a temper tantrum because he fired one of our ambassadors. Well, guess what? That's his job and his right. He can fire them because he doesn't like their shoes. That's part of his job too. Is to hire and fire the people. The embassy workers in our offices across seas, and apparently, well, crap. I mean, are you going to keep somebody employed who's locking horns with you all the time, regardless of the reason? Well, despite the fact that Trump, despite the fact that Clinton and Obama and every other Democrat president has done this, just gone in every time they came into power, and they immediately started wading through the ranks and rank and file with a scythe, mowing them down, and tossing them out, and they're going to throw a hissy because Trump. This is what it boils down to, is that they are screaming in fury because Trump came into office and started doing his job. He's trying to secure our borders, trying to get trade deals through, which he did. And and all these other things he's doing, and they're furious that he's doing it, and he refuses to be intimidated about it. I've said this before. I didn't really, he was not my first choice, not by a long stretch. Because my impression of him, what little I knew about him, he was a multi-billion-dollar businessman, but he was also, basically a showman, as far as I know. The whole. The apprentice thing, and and all the outlandish things that he allegedly got up to, and I'm like, what is this? I figured it was just him doing another one of those, off the wall things, like building Trump Towers or something. I built a big tower, and now I'm going to go run for president. But then the more I saw the man, the more impressed I was with him, and the more pleased I was with how he was doing the job. He may not, now, he may not be a Christian himself, or he may be a very, very worldly and not, shall we say, non-traditional, backslidden one, as a preacher might put it. But the reason that the conservatives and Christians in our country support him so much is because they at least know that he does not regard Christians as the enemy. That's more than can be said for any Democrat candidate in the past 50 years, including the ones that got in office. The man is the first president to have gone on the March for Life, the annual March for Life. Most people don't know this. There is an annual, ever since Roe versus Wade was passed, a farce of legislation if there ever was one. The pro-life people of America have held a march Usually tens of thousands of people, sometimes hundreds of thousands, marching and protesting against the legalization of abortion. And uh, Trump is the first president in history, the first president since ever to have joined the march. He is a pro-life president. That is the policy he had. At one time, he may not have been pro-life, but that's the thing of it. Everybody talks about, back in the past, he had different policies. Yeah, well, he was younger then. It's called growing up. It's called maturing. It's called changing your mind. And, well, pardon me, But I don't think this impeachment is basically the Democrats kicking themselves as hard as they possibly can in the crotch. Because they're completely out of touch. We already knew that these people are completely out of touch with the average American citizen. They talk to a few loudmouths from activist movements at most. But these people haven't lived among their own constituents in decades. They know nothing about American society, and they're completely out of touch, and they are convinced that they are winning the American people over with this impeachment shenanigans. It's not. In fact, it's turning more and more people against them, because it's increasingly obvious that it's just them playing silly-ass games and obstructing the function of our American government. It's not it's it's not going to get them the results they want. And that's the marvelous thing about it, is that they're so freaking clueless. Now, like I said before, these they are out of touch with society, and they hate the man, because he's you couldn't ask for you could ask for a better man, I'm sure, but he's how's the saying go? He's the president America needs and deserves at the moment, or something. I've noticed that in times of crisis, God does not send soft, gentle-spoken, meek men to get us through times of peril. He sends men who can, rock-ribbed men who will do the work. He doesn't send Sunday school teachers into a battlefield. But, okay, now, moving on. This is one of the things I was talking about earlier. Is previous show is the leftist philosophy, the grand unification theory of leftism. Basically, it boils down to, everybody everybody has to be equal, and if somebody is not equal, then they must have cheated. Therefore, the only way to get ahead, the only way to get ahead in a leftist world is to be a victim. If you are a failure, if one person has a successful business, the other person has a terrible at business, and their business fails, if they can turn their failure into, if they can claim loudly enough that they're a victim and that the successful guy has been oppressing them, then they become the hero of the leftist movement. Because obviously, if you're not doing as well as your neighbor, it's because they're oppressing you in leftist think. This is why they will never honor American heroes. I remember back during the Gulf War, during the second Gulf War, there was this one young woman, one of our soldiers. She was captured. She was in a convoy. She was captured, held prisoner, and eventually rescued by our troops. But when she got home, our country gave her a hero's treatment. Ticker tape parades, the whole 9 yards. And she was on the cover of every American magazine. It's an American hero. No, she wasn't. She was a victim. I'm sure, she did her. I won't say whether or not she did her duty as an American soldier or not. I mean, she was in a convoy. Her convoy came under fire, and she got captured. But nothing she did qualifies her as a hero. What happened to her is that she was a victim. She was captured by a bunch of people. It absolutely terrifies me, the idea of any one of my family's female members falling into their clutches. You better dang well believe the Muslims aren't going to treat a female soldier with any dignity or compassion. But that does not make her a hero. Meanwhile, you could look it up. There were dozens of women. There was one young woman who was a Native. She was Native American, Indian. Indian. I forget which tribe. Navajo, I think. But look, there were several people, several soldiers, several female soldiers who earned medals of honor around about the same time. I mean, these women, these soldiers, came under fire and demonstrated great heroism. But the mainstream media and our culture basically just treated them like they didn't exist, kind of like they do with most of the recipients of medals of honor and valor in our armed forces. You see, they weren't. She wasn't a victim. They. You know, Leftists only like you if they can condescend to you. And saying that they like you is a stretch. They'll tolerate you if they don't want to respect you. As long as they can feel sorry for you in some way, everything's hunky dory. But if you have to respect them, if they have to respect you, no, nothing's going to, it's not going to fly. Not with them. This is a fail. This is a human failing. I'll admit to that. It's a universal human failing. We tend to be more solicitous, more solicitous of those who we regard as that we regard with compassion or condescension. That we tend to regard people who are in need and need our help with more benevolence than we do regarding people who we should be admiring and trying to emulate. Hello. Okay, we've got in channel. We've got YouTuber 1752. Is that his age or his kill streak? And we've got Eli and T-Mug. Eli and T-Mug. There's a YouTube show called Glove and Boots. You might want to check out, Eli. It's a hoot. It's a puppet show. And it's not little kitty stuff though. It's I hate to say the word mature. It's not. You say mature nowadays. That means that somebody's naked, or either somebody's naked or somebody's dead. That's what they mean by mature nowadays. When I say mature, I mean like sophisticated, classy, witty, intelligent. Let me put it this way: Charlie Brown and Peanuts. Peanuts. Charles Schultz comic strip. His comic strip was mature. It was sophisticated. It was rather cerebral, actually, for its content. Uh, it was more of if you go back and read it, it was a little bit more of a heavy thinkers kind of comic. Wasn't really given much shrift as that while he was alive, sad to say. But there you have it. I'm on a Dr Pepper high. Wee. There's one thing I wanted to talk about. There was one topic I want to get talked about, and I am not figuring out how to drift the conversation over in that general direction. So I'm just going to jump badly, feet first, into it. Now I saw this video. I saw one. Is one of several I've seen over the years. Discussing, the problem. He was discussing the problem with using stories as metaphors for racism. It's particularly talking animal stories like Zootopia. And he was going, he's going on a long diatribe about how this really doesn't work, as a metaphor for racism, even though it's been pushed as a metaphor for racism. And he says they really should, it doesn't really work. And he says even though they were trying for it, no, he's got it all wrong. Now I'm assuming you've all seen Zootopia. Zootopia. And here, let me see. When we talk about the topic, we should have a picture of the topic. Let's see, window capture. Haha. Let me get over here. Now the movie Zootopia. It went through some really interesting. It went through some really interesting transitions during the time of creation. It went everywhere from being a spoof of the Three Musketeers. Just a moment. It went to being a spy movie, to being set in space, to it went everywhere before they finally buckled down and came up with the story that they had. Now, and a lot of people, the first thing they come, oh, it's a metaphor for racism, the predator versus prey thing, and then they realized when they were talking, that was making some unfortunate implications because, the predators are supposed to be the minority. And, if you're going to call it a metaphor about race issues in, say, America or, well, anywhere else, you're basically implying that the white people are the nice, harmless herbivores, while the black people are all the formerly savage, cannibalistic carnivores. And like, could we really think that, we really want to go there? We really, no, we don't want to go there. But what I think it is that Zootopia, maybe a lot of people saw that, a lot of people pushed for that, a lot of people, maybe maybe working on it, tried to, lens it through that view, and that it was a metaphor for racism. Look, that's one of the things that's annoying about this particular era. From the 90s to today. Look, I was born in the 70s. My parents lived through the 60s. We know what my parents know, at least know what a society going through racial strife looks like. So, and they sort of passed the information down to me while I was growing up. So, but this day and age, we treat the topic of racism the same way that when we talk about movies nowadays, everybody talks about it's a metaphor for race. It's a metaphor for racism. Racism, race, 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 racism, 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 racism. We do this the same way we used to. They used to during the 80s. The liberals would say that every movie made in the 50s was supposedly an allegory for the Red Scare. Communism, communism, communism. Red Scare, communism, communism. Metaphor for communism. The King Kong, metaphor for communism. The pod people, metaphor for communism. The brain from planet Eros, it's metaphor for communism. Everything was a metaphor for communism to these social activists. What we used to call, what we call social justice warriors. There's got to be a better term for it. I mean, these people are not interested in justice, and they're definitely not interested in. They're not interested in justice, and they're certainly not warriors. The word the metaphor, the phrase we're looking for here is social activist weenie. Is the first thing they call it. Social issue fetish people. That's what it comes to. People that are obsessed with political talk, that are obsessed with leftist wank issues. They see everything through a teeny tiny little lens. And nowadays, instead of everything's about the coming, now that the Soviet Union fell under its own weight, which is what you can expect with a communist nation, it's based politics and war and all that other stuff to the side. Communism does not work. We could have all saved ourselves a lot of stress if we'd have simply remembered that during the Cold War. You know that? If we'd have just believed, these people are eating their own shoes. They're not going to be as big a threat to the world as we think they are. We just keep an eye on them and wait for the cards to fall where they will. We just wait for the dominoes to topple. And it finally happened. The Soviet Union just went and blew apart at the seams because it couldn't sustain itself. Because communism doesn't work. Even when communism becomes totalitarianism, it still doesn't work. It cracks apart at the seams because it's fundamentally flawed. But I'm getting off the topic here. But getting back to the point is these social issue fetish wonks, they see everything through a teeny tiny little lens. They pigeonhole everything. They took Zootopia and they pigeonholed. Their big issue, the social fetish wonks, their big issue of the time is race. Race. And so, Zootopia had a lot of things that could be interpreted as being about race. It was about it was about bigotry, and they said race issue, and they pigeonholed the movie as a race issue movie. And the problem is that when you do that, it's like looking at something through a microscope, squinting at it as hard as you can through a microscope. looking for that incriminating detail. Racism. I see it there. It's right there. And when you're looking through a microscope, you don't see the bigger picture. Zootopia was not trying to make a metaphor or allegory about racism. It was doing something that was much broader and much more applicable. It was talking about prejudice. Now, in our culture, we use racism and prejudice interchangeably. They're not. Racism, well, is racism. It's about race. It's about skin color. It's about it's about all the stupid things that's associated with. But prejudice is something else. Prejudice is, literal definition, to prejudge someone. To draw conclusions about somebody without giving them a chance to prove themselves. It's one thing to be aware of our differences and to accommodate them. But this movie, it was much broader. It was the prejudicial assumptions that somebody as small as Judy Hopps couldn't do the job of a cop. The assumptions that Nick was always going to be crooked, and that even though if you watch the movie, it points out, hey, guess what? The rabbit is small, and some things are just the high shelf is still out of her reach, and the sloth is slow, and the giraffes are tall. There are differences, but civilization is about accommodating those differences within reason. That was the point of the movie, and that you and that people made the police assumed that because Judy Hopps wasn't a great big burly fierce large animal like all the others, that she couldn't do the job, even though consider this. It's a damn stupid thing that they didn't have an entire division of critters Judy Hopps size or smaller already. They have an entire district in their city, little rodentia, little rodentia, which is literally nothing but teeny tiny mice, mice and shrews and little animals like that. And so, they have a need in their society for animals who can, fit through the front door. It might be easier. It might be miles easier for a rhino cop to deal with a huge traffic accident or something, or to deal with large, dangerous. But what happened? What was Judy Hopps' first arrest? A weasel that literally dashed between all the other cops' feet and made them look like fools. Well, she went after him on her own and caught him. Hello. But anyway, again, steer this back onto subject. Stay on target. Stay on target. But the cops prejudged Judy as being unable to do the job, even though she had proven she could get through the academy. And she blew the doors off. But they wouldn't give up their prejudice against her. And she had to, they treated her like a joke and a fool, and she had to climb uphill tooth and nail to prove herself to them. And then there was Nick. That scene with his childhood, where the other kids tricked him into thinking he was going to be a member of the Scouts, and they beat him up and stuffed a muzzle on his face. uh, just I'm sitting there, and I'm like, oh, and, my heart just boom, crack, falls on the floor, breaks in pieces for the guy. I wanted to hug the little guy so bad, but again, it was about prejudice, and prejudice is often rooted in the past. Now you figure in their society, it's obvious. There's a difference between the predators and the prey, and when they go running through the museum, you see that gazillions of years ago they really did prey on one another. Of course, it's notable that the caveman rabbits were carrying spears and holding the savage predator at spear point in one of the displays. So it wasn't all a one-way street. But this is a society that was holding on to prejudices that were old news, that were ancient history, even before history started. The fact that they're able to live in one city together and function together and build a city at all demonstrates that the whole predator versus prey, when predators have savage instincts, was old news before they were moving out of the caves and building mud huts. But prejudice is largely judging people about things that happened 1,000 miles away and 1,000 years ago before they were ever born. And really, I think they should have had a point where somebody, they had that one scene with the scientist watching over the night howler infected predators. They should have had just one little scene to point it out that the whole predator prey thing was a bunch of irrational hoo ha. Because it is, even in the real world, there's not a simple divide. You and I know there is not just a simple divide in the animal kingdom between predators and prey. There are many animals who are mid-tier. They are both prey to one animal and predator of another. In fact, that's the majority of species. Then you have species like raccoons and bears and that are omnivores, and there are other creatures that are herbivores, obligate herbivores, that are more dangerous than any predator. The bison, the water buffalo is one of the most damn dangerous animals on the planet, and it lives on grass. The deadliest animal in Africa, the one that kills the most people, is the hippo. Yeah, that roly-poly goofy-looking thing that you saw at the zoo. Those things kill more people than the crocodiles do. They should have had one scene where you remember they did the interview, and Judy Hopps is standing up there with the pictures of all these predators up on the wall, on a projector, showing all fierce and somebody, they should have had one of the, they should have had the scientist, a scientist character somewhere, or a scholar or something, say, looked at that display and said, "This is ridiculous. This is bunk." Because they had predators like these polar bears grouped in with a little bitty otter, all lumped together. And somebody should say, "This is ridiculous." I mean, that polar bear up there is one thing, but the otter, even when even in the savage days, they preyed on nothing more than clam shells and fish. And they were often prey to bigger animals like those. And you have this one animal over here, and there have been examples of herbivores eating meat too. And he should have said this whole predator, and he should have pointed out that, this predator-prey social divide we have, is just, well, it should have been the equivalent of eugenics back in the 40s. Bad junk science that had become a popular trope. And I could have written a scene in there, not even 30 seconds long, that would have established, that okay, first of all, that all, this scientist should have pointed out, that all animals have fierce, dangerous, primitive instincts. Even a rabbit will commit tremendous acts of violence against another animal. The primitive instincts. That should have been his point. That should have been foreshadowing for the discovery of the night howlers. The night howlers were proof that even the predators and prey both could be reduced to vicious savagery. They should have taken a minute to make that point, and maybe to even to if you did it quickly and deftly enough, you could have made a vastly broad point. One that this simplistic divide down the middle of their society, predator over here, prey over there, just did not apply to the real world. That it was popular opinion junk science, fabricated by bigots, and that we, the point is that we all animals under the skin. And even a meek little bunny could be as just as vicious and savage as a wolf in the wrong circumstances. And that's one of the more popular tropes. You see it all. The werewolf stories, for instance. Stories of werewolves. One of the things they say, the wolf instincts are taking me over. I'm becoming savage and feral. Horseradish. Look, a wolf, except for some highly specific species-specific necessary instincts, like the need, the bird's instinct to migrate north, or south, to migrate south in the winter and north in the summer, or the like. Overall, animals do not have any instincts that aren't reflected in human nature as well. Instinctual behavior is basically just behavior with intelligence stripped away. You reduce somebody to the intellect of, in Dungeons and Dragons terms, 4 intellect or lower, their behavior is going to be animalistic. They will be just as feral, just as vicious, and so on. They will demonstrate all the instinctive animalistic behaviors of any other animal. They speak of animal instincts as if they were like a magic layover. It's not. It's animal instincts are in the background. They're the background noise beneath intelligence and spirit. In a more realistic portrayal of a werewolf isn't that the werewolf is being overwhelmed by wolf instincts. Unless he's pressed with the insatiable urge to sniff his own butt. But but the all those supposedly wolfen instincts are the same that any human has. We just have intelligence on top of that we ignore it, or we sublimate it, or we put it in a position where it's uh, civilized and domesticated, tamed, if you will. I would like to see a werewolf where the werewolf isn't somebody whose mind is subsumed by the overpowering instincts of the wolf, but rather that his intelligence drops away, revealing the wolf underneath inside his soul. That was the original concept behind Jekyll and Hyde. The story of Jekyll and Hyde is that this Jekyll had been researching in rather arcane areas of human psychology, and he believed that he wanted to see what happened. Basically, to see what happened if you stripped away the ego and left nothing but the id. In fraudulent pseudo-scientific terms, he wanted to see what happened if you stripped away the veneer of civilization, and Mr. Hyde was the result. Mr. Hyde originally wasn't this feral animal. He was intelligent. He was capable of speech, but there was something about him. He had just something about him that set your teeth on edge just being around him. Anyway, topic hammered into the ground. My shipping. Okay, the whole story. The only question you have for me today is my shipping. Are you referring to relation shipping in my stories? I'm waiting for an answer so I can decide what to say. You know, I keep promising myself I'm just going to. What I need to do, I need to schedule myself. I need to get on a rigorous schedule, a really serious schedule where I think what my operating plan is that from to try at least tomorrow. Today's Sunday, tomorrow's Monday, whole new week. Start off. What I'm going to do is that break the day up into hours. Have my breakfast, come in, shower up, clean up, have my breakfast, all that crap, and then I'm going to sit down and spend 1 hour, 1 hour working on it, each hour working on a different project, and each I've got dozens of fan fictions and stories sitting there. I've got dozens of I've got several comics that could really stand an update, and several old commissions and projects and other things. The only way I can do it is 1 hour at a time. And if I can discipline myself enough to do that without getting distracted, but I will confess to this, I will allow myself, an hour or so to well, never mind. Just to pursue my World of Warcraft addiction. I'm so close to finally getting the Volperons. So close. So closey, 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 close, and yet so far. But anyway, I'll work on that later. It's, okay, now I'm going to start. That's what I'm going to do. That's my plan for tomorrow, anyway. If I can, I don't have an alarm clock. Well, I do, but it doesn't work right, and I don't trust it. And I've got so many things that I need. So many things around the house that must be fixed, and I'm debating on what to fix first. My bed frame is broken down. I need a new bed, new frame, and a new mattress. That's one thing, and this is after all the utilities and bills and tax whatever's are paid, and I've got to decide, but I really, because it's killing me not getting proper sleep. I need a new bed. I need a new office chair because both pieces of furniture. I have two pieces of furniture, and they're both killing me. Uh, well, I have three, but I can't use. It's a recliner, but it doesn't. The recliny part won't lift my legs, and and I don't know what it is, but the fake leather is peeling away and flaking all. If I sit down in it, first of all, it takes an act of Congress to get back out of it, even without the footy thing up. And then when I get up, I'm covered with little black flakes, so I can't use it. Now, wouldn't Bayleaf have known everything about Taylor from before? Yeah, he would have. He would have known everything that was in the story, in Wildbow's story, but he wouldn't have known her. It's the difference between reading a novel or an autobiography about somebody and knowing them in person. And many of the things that she went through, and that quite frankly broke her the way she was, have not happened to her because he was there. So, in some regards, she's a different person than she would have been. So I'm not sure what it's probably a little odd to her that he knew all these. It probably a little freaky to her that he knows all these details and facts about her life and her past and everything. But kind of like how weird it would be to have somebody who had read your autobiography show up and tell you all about your life. But there's more about her. There's more to her and to him than either of them knows about each other. So fairly normal. I'm still on the fence as to how much of his own past he recalls and how much of it matters to him. I'm thinking that he's basically going to have an isekai origin. Uh, Basically, that he was hit by a truck or something and woke up in the agent's office, so to speak. I think what some people are missing. One guy was complaining. I've had people complaining about the story that the agents are too much a part of the story. The ROB agent is too much a part of the story, and that and I've had another person complain that it bugged him that because the agent is just using him as a plaything, and I think I think what he's overlooked is the fact that even though the fact that the term entertainment was mentioned when agent was explaining his motivations. Uh, Everybody's thinking that he's like Alastor from has-been hotel or something. He's helping out, but only for shits and giggles. But what it is, as I don't really think I think there are some details that didn't quite get across about the race of cosmic entities that he belongs to. That we're talking about. Think about it. They're an alien race. You picture yourself. You're a member of a race that has technologically, scientifically, however you want to put it, advanced to the point where you have, you're literally post scarcity. You have no needs that you cannot fulfill easily. You can go anywhere at the snap of a finger or a blink of an eye. Do just unfathomably powerful abilities. You can do just about anything. Go just about anywhere. Do just about what you please. And you have no necessities, needs, material needs as we might understand them, or ones that are so intrinsically fulfilled that you don't have to worry about them. Uh, what does that leave? What goals would you have to pursue after that point? The general answer would be things like intellectual stimulation, spiritual growth, uh, interaction with, fulfillment of your curiosity, entertainment, mental stimulation, anything to fill up eternity with, basically. And, anything to fill up a few million years worth of time. And, and that's where his society is. It's reached a point where it's gone past being an industrial. Uh, it's gone past being industrial. It's gone past being a service oriented economy. Uh, it's a mental stimulation economy, entertainment, involvement, interaction. Uh, and so, one of the things, fortunately, their philosophy and their culture is of benevolent intellect. They fall on the side of the light, morally speaking, more or less. And one of the things that they do to pass their time and to find fulfillment is they try and help out. They charity work, basically. They find an alien race that could use a hand and they help them out, or they find a lone individual out among all the parallel realities, and they try and help them, you know, uh, better their lives, or just like that. And unfortunately, they've found over the thousands of years of doing this that they have to be very careful about how they go about doing it, because they're vastly powerful and they're vastly intelligent. They're more if they intervene too directly with a less advanced civilization, uh, they can really throw things out of whack. They could end up being feared as monsters or demons or cosmic horrors, or worse, in their outlook. Worst of all, they could end up being worshipped as gods, and that, for obvious reasons, that freaks them out. So their society has developed an incredibly arcane and complex system of rules about how they are permitted to interact with mortal races, as it were. You know, uh, to uh, to our perception, the rules seem random and arbitrary and make no sense. It's basically, you know, them trying to explain their legal system to us would be like you or me trying to explain math to a dog. Or more aptly, trying to explain traffic laws to a Bronze Age warrior. He's not gonna understand diddly about traffic lights or signs or right of way or anything like that. He's gonna get hop in his chariot, go out and get creamed by a car. Basically, a lot of the more bizarre behaviors of random ROBs is that they are restricted in how they interact with mortals by the rules. Now, the thing of it is that in my story, the random omnipotent quote unquote being agent, he is their society. He's basically their society's equivalent of uh, well, basically a used car salesman. Just bordering on being a little bit of a con artist. You know, still has a good heart. You know, still of good intent, but he's not above shaving the rules really close. And that's why he's taken up the issue with Bayleaf and with the Wormverse. And this is why he's had to play his cards so close to the vest, and why he's basically been given so much leeway. What other two characters, new or existing, am I going to get together? Well, in most of the My Hero Academia stories, it's pretty obvious that just like in canon, it's going to be Izuku and Uraraka. Now, I don't know how this is a little bit spoilery, but in at least one story, I'm going to have Manita and Suyu, the frog girl. They're going to end up a couple because I'm working on the chapter right now. They're stuck together because of that mind reading perfume. They can't. The thing of it is they've just discovered that not only that they only block out other people so long as they're close enough to each other. If they get too far apart, they start hearing other people's mental voices again, only deafeningly loud this time. So they're having to stay within 20 feet or so of each other. They're having to stay within 10 to 20 feet of each other for the next 2 or 3 days while things sort themselves out. And they're going to learn to their surprise that they have a lot more in common than they thought they did. And they're going to get some startling understanding and insight about each other. Sue is going to be, in fact, rather chagrined to learn more about Manita and realize that there's a reason that he is. There's a lot of complex reasons that he is the way he is. I had a lot of people compliment me on the recent My Little Hero Academia chapter. They said it gave a lot of insight into Manita's character, When I pointed out basically Manita, everybody dismisses that character. He's just the perv character, ew ew ew, and you know times being what they are, being the comedy relief perv character is a easy ticket to being hated arbitrarily by everyone. So, but I pointed out to okay, he basically corners or rather Izuku is asking asking people, why are you becoming a hero? Why, he's trying to prepare for his speech, and what's your motivation for being a hero? And Mineta tells him his canon reason. He says to get girls, to be popular, and to get girls. And Midoriya starts to dismiss that as shallow, and Manita points out, "Look at me. Look and is no look at me. What do you see? What am I? I'll tell you what I am. I'm short. I'm a midget. He's about 3 feet tall, canonically 3.5 feet tall. Peter Dinklage is 4 foot tall. He's he's uh, he's midget short. At the age of 15, he's and it's pretty obvious he's not going to get much taller. He's funny looking, and he has a kind of a gross, quirk that makes detachable balls grow on his head. Kind of you know. So his life is just, his childhood has probably been just about as bad or worse than Midoriya's was. Because, Midoriya was picked on and bullied for being quirkless. Imagine how Manita was bullied. And he points out, that girls are hypocrites about things like looks and heights. Looks and appearances and physicality. He says, if I go on, Tumblr and if I go on Tumblr or whatever and type in that I don't want, that I don't like to date fat chicks, boom goes the dynamite. But if a girl goes on and says that ew, no boys less than 5'8", she's being discretionary and wise, picking only, she's holding out for the best. And it's going to be revealed in a story that Sue is going to find out the story how it is this coming chapter is that in order to stay together they both have to stay overnight at each other's houses, first hers then his, in a row, and they fabricate a load about having to work on a school project together, but anyway they Sue is going to learn that Mineta rather, has a rather painful past. That, and I'm going with statistics here. This is a true problem, real life issue. So it's very highly likely this is the reason Mineta is the way he is. We assume he is his father. I'm just fabricating this guy completely out of thin air, but his father is a very, fairly was a fairly well-to-do artist and illustrator. Worked in manga a lot, among other things, and manga and anime, and his and well, basically one day Manita's mom decided, looked at Manita's dad and said, I don't feel fulfilled. And she divorced him, ran off with a pool boy, took him for almost everything that he owned, down to the last dollar, and has been basically running around the globe, reliving the script from Eat, Pray, Love. And basically, it devastated both Manita and his father. And because she basically took him to the cleaners in the divorce settlement, and worse, she didn't even, she dumped. Uh, she basically dumped Manita too. She said she didn't want uh, custody, not even shared custody. He, she signed over custody completely to his father. So not only did she reject Midoriya's father, she rejected Manita's father. She rejected Manita, and so that's made Manita's among one of the walking wounded, and his father has had to resort to basically he had to resort to producing hentai in order to pay the bills. He could crank out. It was cheap, and they managed to pull out of a hole, but they're still living far worse than they did back before the divorce. Throw in on top of this that Midita's dad is bitter, angry, and he's had at least a couple of relationships since the divorce that have gone badly, and both Manita and his father have a really cynical view of women and marriage and, well, you name it. Throw all these things together. You got they both been betrayed by a woman, by women. They're both Manita has to watch his father crank out this money, and he's had to deal with seeing women that basically had no self-respect for themselves or for his father. And, just the nightmare, spaghetti tangled mess that you can imagine that kind of life would lead to. Uh, he's not exactly developed a enriched or healthy or fulfilled perspective on women, and he's really not. Manita growing up around it, he's really not aware of it. Growing up as a toddler with freshly inked nudie pics hanging all over the place, waiting for the postman to pick them up. She really hasn't uh, broadened his sensibilities that much. And the events over the past couple of days have basically shocked him into realizing just how callous, that how bitter and how cynical and, yes, callous his father has become, and how it's affected him too. And Manita's going to learn about Sue. Sue basically, Sue in the anime and the manga, she's very no nonsense, and he's this is canonical for her, is that in a great number of he's going to learn while he's about her past. Growing up, she has to, her parents both work, so she has to take care of her younger siblings, and that's not left her a lot of time. Didn't leave her any time for fun or making friends, and she had trouble making friends anyway because her frog quirk has left her with a very expressionless, almost largely expressionless face, and it sort of creeped people out. And she ended up kind of ostracized for it. And but because it's canonical, the reason that she is so outspoken is because her face doesn't, her facial expressions aren't overt enough. People don't pick up on her emotional cues. So she tends to blurt out loud whatever she's thinking as bluntly as possible. Now, if I ever get back to riding in the Great Alicorn Hunt, eventually Luna's going to find herself a guy. Rest assured of that. In other stories, let's see. Man, I got a lot of stories going on, and most of them, sitting idle. I'm actually in Ladybird. I'm going to have Taylor and Greg Vader end up getting together. I've said this 1,000 times. The fandom of Worm really largely does not like Greg Vader, and I credit that to the highly inobservant nature of most readers, because people reading the story is written entirely from Taylor Hebert's worldview, from her point of view, from her perspective, and it kind of escapes most readers' notice that most of the things she highly dislikes Greg Vader about, it's a little bit hypocritical, because she dislikes him. He hangs around her and talks at her. He's almost autistic about stuff. He's got no clue, no social clues whatsoever, and he tends to hang around her because she's an outcast too, and she's about the only girl at school that doesn't treat him like something stuck to their shoe, and she regards him as creepy, and so everybody in the fandom hates on him. Nobody ever seems to realize that from an outside perspective, Taylor Hebert, the protagonist, uh, by and large, looks like Greg Vader looks to her. A slouchy, poorly dressed, no zero social skills loser who probably gets picked on and beaten up by everybody, and her lack what that it really got me her lack of empathy. You know, I mean, like, damn it, he's trying to be, he's a clod, but he's trying to be a friend. You're sitting there complaining, oh, I'm so lonely, I have no friends anymore, and you won't give the one guy who, the one poor slob who tries to talk to you, you won't give him a chance. Come on, Taylor. A good portion of the thing that irritates me about canonical Taylor is her passiveness. She is literally given superhuman abilities, and she still slouches and mopes around with the mentality of a victim. I'm sorry. If you gave me the power to control insects, if I was in high school, I had a bunch of bullies, sadistically tormenting me all the time, uh, and I had the power to control, insects. Even as lame as that power sounds at first, I guarantee you, I would find my way to get down off my horse. I'm too noble to use these powers against innocent civilians. I would be finding a way to use those powers in a way to make their lives miserable, or at the very least, make it a hell of a lot harder for them to give me grief. But she doesn't do that. She just sits there and takes it like a bitch. Man, you wouldn't even have to do much. I mean, it's not like you'd have to go carry on the school or anything. I mean, just drop a roach down their blouse at an inopportune time. Have a bee sting them. When they start to make trouble, they'll be immediately distracted. Come on. I've been tempted to write. I've been tempted to start another uh, worm story where Taylor finds herself as locker mates with a new kid comes in, takes the locker next to hers. And he's a shrimpy little geek with Coke bottle glasses. You know, no buff Latino, pseudo Latino looking dude this time. He's just a little bug-eyed geek, and Sophia tries to harass him, and he jabs her with a taser. He doesn't turn a hair. He just she comes up behind him, smacks him in the back of the head. Get out of the way, bug. And he just turns around, looks up at her, pulls the taser out, drops right in front of Taylor, and then goes back to his locker like nothing happened, while she's spazzing out on the floor. And it turns out that he's a complete raging computer geek, and a science nerd. Even without the tinker power, and he ends up triggering shortly after her and becoming a tinker. And yeah, Taylor ends up with a geeky friend who has no F's to give. And and his whole point, I don't need to be a super. I don't need to have superpowers. To deal with something like this. I just simply have to have no F's to give. Let's see. Man, I got a lot of stories. There's still. Uh, this is why I need to start doing a daily hour by hour schedule. Or is it schedule or schedule? Depends on whether you're British or not. Don't let a British person razz you about not speaking proper English. Neither are they. No, they're not. They're really not. They're not speaking with a proper English accent. They're not speaking with proper English. This is a fact. Is that around the time of the Industrial Revolution, what they're speaking with is a informed accent. It's an accent that passed down to them from the boarding schools during the Industrial Revolution. What it was is that the nouveau riche, the new rich people started moving into the rich neighborhoods and everything, and in a desperate need to belong, they started they started sending their kids to the boarding schools, supposedly, spruce them up, and sophisticate their children up, out of their rough origins. And the kids, all being shoved together in these, they came up with, they started developing an accent. It was a boarding school accent, and that accent spread out. That's the major. That is the central accent that most of England and Great Britain speaks now. So don't let them razz you about that. It's actually the New England accent that is far closer to the accent that Shakespeare spoke with. What book? What book is this, please? What? Oh, well, I wasn't talking about a book. I was just speculating on a story I'd like to start writing. Another Taylor Hebert story. Just what I need. Yet another story to start that no, when I haven't even finished. I'll tell you what. I'm going to make a rule for myself. I'm not going to start any more stories until I finish one that I'm currently working on. Okay, I've maxed out my load. But I wanted to write I've been tempted to write a story where Taylor Hebert goes to school one day, at the beginning of the story, and she's her depressed, apathetic self, and a new guy, takes the locker next to hers. He's this shrimpy little Coke bottle glass guy. He's a science geek. She finds out later. Not he doesn't have any powers. He doesn't he's not a tinker or anything like that. He's just really, really smart, in the regular fashion, and he's a real techno geek. But he's just this shrimpy looking little nerd next to her, and I want to have Sophia and the bitches three walk up behind him. Sophia sees the kid standing there, slaps him in the back of the head, and says, "Beat it, worm." And he turns around, looks at her, doesn't even raise an eyebrow, just reaches in his coat, pulls out a taser, and zaps her, and then goes back to his locker, sorting his books again, while she spazzes out on the floor. Meanwhile, Taylor's standing there watching, having a religious epiphany. And I wanted the idea to be that this nerd befriends her, and he's got issues. Heck, he's got a whole lifetime subscription, but and he finds out that she's a cape and starts making up. Why are you letting life walk all over you like that? I've got I'm a 98-pound nothing, and I don't let life walk all over me like they do you. You could do so much, and change the story from there. Uh, there was this one. There's this one self-insert fan fiction. Well, let's call them what they are: isekai. That's the type of manga or anime where the character, they die, and suddenly they're reincarnated in an they die or they disappear, and suddenly they're reincarnated in a new world, usually a fictional setting, sometimes even a video game setting or the like. There are dozens of absolute. Some are absolutely brilliantly weird uh, in their execution. But anyway, the story was is that this guy, he dies and he wakes up. Now, if you've read Worm, you know who the Slaughterhouse Nine are. He wakes up as the Siberian. Now, the Siberian in Slaughterhouse Nine is actually a projection. There's this guy named Manton, and he triggered with the power to project a human figure that was super strong and literally indestructible. It's strong. And it's a naked woman with bone white skin with jet black stripes. The woman in question, the projection in question looks like his daughter, his dead daughter, and more issues than TV Guide. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, the protagonist, he wakes up as the Siberian, not as Manton, but as the projection, and it takes him a minute to figure out where he is and what's going on, and he looks around, and Manton has keeled over dead. Had an aneurysm, his head blew, and yet the Siberian's still there, and he has all the Siberian, the powers of the Siberian. He turns around, he looks over at, he looks over at Jack Slash. He walks over and looks at Jack Slash and says, you really are an asshole. You know what? You were nothing but a Johnny Depp lookalike, trying to be a knockoff Joker. And since the Siberian has never spoken, this sort of catches Jack Slash. He's just sitting there. He's sharpening off. He's like, what? And then she smacks his head off, literally. Then she proceeds to kill most of the rest of the Slaughterhouse Nine, except for Riley Bonesaw. He explains to he realizes that Riley is just a little girl who is traumatized, enslaved, and brainwashed by Jack Slash. He says, "Come on." She says, "Come on, we're leaving here." And he basically adopts Bonesaw, and he runs off into the hills, and he ends up in Brockton Bay, and he proceeds and he proceeds he proceeds to work on deprogramming Bonesaw and driving, making the rest of the world think that he's absolutely out of his mind, because out of her mind, because And everybody's freaking out. Uh, as the Siberian, he explains, both he and Bonesaw were basically mastered, enslaved by the Slaughterhouse Nine, and he proceeds to try and make heroes out of himself and out of Bonesaw, and he exults in doing just absolutely batshit insane things, just to make people just question their sanity. He breaks into a merchant's drug den, dressed as from Elsa from Frozen, and singing "Let it go, let it go." It's a I can't remember where it is. Uh, the thing of it is, it's either on Sufficient Velocity or Space Battles. I can't remember the name of the story, and I have no idea how to search for. I've got I've got all these stories that I've story threads that I've earmarked, hundreds of them, thousands of them, probably at this point. Uh, uh, well, let's look at look at let's see here. Fanfic Siberian Worm Siberian fanfic. Here we go. Any? Let's see. Vicarious. There's a lot of Siberian fanfics out there. Let's see. Let's see. Let's see. I want to be the goat. Let me see. I think that's called. No, that's not it. Let's see. I have no idea. Let me see here. Let me see if I can find the link. Let's see. Profile reactions given. Bookmarks. Here we go. I have not added any bookmarks yet. Then what do they call all the threads that I've made? Thread marks. Thread marks. Here, let's see. Thread marks. Intrepid, Taylor Varga, Spider Hat, an essence of Dungeon Keeper Amy, Taylor Varga, and scaling up. I really gotta, let's see here. I have got a lot. Ship of Fools, Despite, Exodus, Teleburger. Tarask on bet. Alright, I've got a lot of threads here. Let's take a minute here. Nemesis, I know what that one is. That was terrible. I have been talking for almost an hour with my microphone off, haven't I? Ah, son of a crumb bum. Okay, I'm going to back up and start all over again. Okay, one, don't bother going to Archive of Our Own to look for updates for the next month. They banned me for 30 days. Because apparently, over the past 5 years, I got three strikes against me. They accused me of harassing some snowflake. They won't tell me who accused me of harassment or what I was supposed to have said or done. They accused me of plagiarism at one point. I don't know what that was from, because I darn well know I've never committed plagiarism. And they most recently threw a fit because I put a link to my Patreon and my homepage on the bottom of my stories. In a line that says, "Go check out my Patreon and my homepage for more of my art and other stuff." Which was well within which I read. I read the rules. They sent me a copy of the page of rules they say I broke, and I read the rules, and they're full of it. Or whoever wrote it is full of it. They don't care what it actually says. They're using the force to feel what they should do, apparently. And so I'm banned from Archive of Our Own. On them, I don't care. Well, I do care, but I just hope it bugs them. And of course, I can't fix the files until they unban me. Typical snowflake logic there. You fix what makes me mad, or I won't let you back on again. Well, I have to get on the page in order to fix the problem that's upsetting you, Snowpea. Now, you know. Well, heck with them. Also, it brought up the point that I was talking about is there was one section in my story, The Warcrafter, where it addresses, why, I knew people were going to start asking, oh, at this point in the story, Taylor is living under the same roof as Bayleaf, and they're all on their own. Ooh, I bet they're jumping bones. I'm like, oh, please. And I put this in here just basically to explain it. Bayleaf was discovering that Taylor's world was, in some ways, more sexually conservative than his. Because, among other things, the continued attacks of the Endbringers, the three monsters that were basically rampaging and destroying one city somewhere in the world every 3 months. Hello? Well, I forget how many months it was supposed to be. 3 months, five. Well, it doesn't matter how many months. But I basically, I cribbed this from another author. So I'll confess to that right up. But it made such an interesting point. I thought. People assume that our current state of, well, to be blunt, sexual quote unquote liberation and licentiousness is the natural state of affairs, and that it will continue indefinitely, no matter what. They also assume it was the same way back in the days of yore, and everybody else was running around humping like monkeys, just like they are today, and nobody gave a care to it. That's not the case. It has only been in the past half century or so that we have had cheap, safe, moderately reliable birth control. The birth control pills, condoms, all the other little toys in the toolbox. You know what I'm saying? And but we've had them longer. I mean, they were making sheepskin condoms all the way back in the 1800s, but it's only fairly recently, historically speaking, that they were cheap and affordable enough that you could go down, that people could afford to give them away for free at schools. And but the thing of it is that due to the effect of the embargoes wrecking international trade, or reducing it to a trickle, suddenly a lot of things suddenly started becoming more expensive. Things like petroleum byproducts, latex, rubber, medicines like birth control, medicines for administering during pregnancy or during an abortion, and so on and so on and so forth. That basically the cost of casual sex suddenly went up, and along with the cost of all the odds and ends, the risk, particularly for young women, would go through the roof. You see, or in other words, it would return to what is normal for most of human history. Again, it's only fairly recently that we've had safe birth control, and it's only fairly recently that we had fairly safe birth procedure. That medical care for a pregnant woman, for a woman giving birth, for a woman expecting, most of that didn't exist for most of human history, and what little did exist was kind of hit and miss, to say the least. As to repeat myself, they told a story about a Lamaze class. The coach was introducing everybody, and they asked, "Okay, what is your biggest anxiety about the pregnancy?" And you say, "Is it a boy or is it a girl?" And another would say, "Oh, am I ready to be a mother?" And and all these little things. And then finally, the last mother, who had lived in I believe Central America, I'm not sure where, she said, "Will the baby and I survive?" It got real quiet because it hadn't struck any of these mothers. They took for granted that their pregnancy would be, one, successful, two, safe, and that both they and the baby would come through and be perfectly healthy. They took it for granted. When less than a century ago, it was the divine grace of God. There was a reason that men used to pace outside the hospital room and smoke through a pack in 5 minutes. And it wasn't because they were nervous about being a daddy. And the point of the story was that in Taylor's world, young women, this big, the problems they had been showing, the privation and the constant bludgeoning that the world's infrastructure had been taking, both to international shipping and to domestic production, had rendered things spotty at best. And suddenly, young women were realizing, and due to various knock-on effects, economically speaking, birth control suddenly became a lot less an easy purchase. It stopped being a convenience and started being a luxury again, and a rather expensive one, and one hard, even when it wasn't expensive, hard to get. And young women were starting to realize again, after the first, this has been going on for 20 years, and after the first few years, young women were realizing, hey, my sexual lifestyle is suddenly a lot more risky, as in, I could die. I could die from any number of diseases, and I could die in a hospital bed trying to give birth to a baby. And consequently, in Taylor's words, a lot of the attitudes about sex had rewound a few decades worth, where it was more expected for a young woman to say no, and that a lot of young women were going, no, not until, no huggy, no kissy until I see a wedding ring. This was largely, I put this in largely because it was, well, because the concept fascinated me, and realizing that so few authors understand or acknowledge the idea of knock-on effects. You make one change in your society, and there should be thousands of domino effects throughout it, and you see almost none of them in most stories. Reed Richards is useless. Doesn't begin to cover it. It's the idea in the comics where you have all these super scientists running around and everybody's still driving Edsels. But and people that read that, they got mad at me. They got mad at me for suggesting that there wouldn't be free condoms forever, or that people would suddenly become a little more old-fashioned, and prudish, and he's just pushing his agenda. He's puritanical, blah 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 blah. It was like me and one other person saying, "Hold on here. You're ignoring this is applicable to the story because we're talking about a world that is basically in the middle of the privations of a long dragged out war. In terms of destruction, I mean these endbringers are coming along, destroying one city every few months. That's the equivalent of a Hiroshima every few months on our world, and the high crime rate, the supervillains running around, and monsters like the Slaughterhouse Nine, or the or the Sleeper, or the there are a bunch of other S-class threats that are supposed to be just wandering around the planet, wrecking things in their path, and nobody seems to be able to stop them. Excuse me. So, certain attitudes are going to get a little bit more, pardon the term, conservative. And as one dum-dum kept arguing, if they couldn't have condoms, then they couldn't have cars. Huh? Well, they need rubber for tires, don't they? And then blah, 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 blah. It's like talking to a chimpanzee, I swear. Yes. Talking to a chatty Cathy doll. You pull that string on their back, you're only going to get the same 5 sentences over and over again. Couldn't get through to this person that most of what you take for granted as a given in society is actually a luxury of convenience. This is not the baseline for society. It's exceptional. What we are at right now is exceptional by any standard in human history. And most of what we take for granted is incredibly fragile. And it would take very little to upset the apple cart. You can't get that through to some people, though. It's extraordinary trying to get it across. Of course, writing a story where the world is completely different from anything because people in capes and giant monsters are running around, you really wouldn't be much of a fun read. You need some common ground, some familiarity with the story and with the setting in order to enjoy it as much. But there you have it. Way too many writers, they don't think out the consequences of the changes they make. Or just how bad. Basically, one rule, you have to think with everything you do in a story or anything else. You have to think at least one of the things they suggest you have to think 3 steps ahead. Okay, what is this? What is it? Most people just go one. This is why liberals have so much trouble adjusting to the real world, because they think we'll adopt socialism and we'll adopt socialism and everything will be better. What their thing is, for instance, we'll get universal health care, and then you won't, and then I won't have to pay any money to at the desk when I go into the doctor's office or into the hospital. And since nobody will have to pay for it, everybody will be happy. Yay! And they don't think through to the next step. They don't think through. Everybody gets free healthcare, but where is all the medicine coming from? Where are all the where are all the where's all the pay for the doctors coming from? Where's the pay for all the nurses coming from? Who's going to pay for the building to be built, and where's this one? The government will pay for it. It's like a child. So you tell a child, I couldn't buy you any candy because I don't have any money. Well, buy some. This is what I was talking about earlier. Is these leftist ideology and progressivism ism is it's looking at the world, squinting at it myopically through a microscope, and missing the big picture. In fact, missing the small picture. All you're seeing is one tiny cell, and not adjusting accordingly. It is 23:12:35, otherwise known as quarter after 11, approximately, give or take a minute. Is anybody still out there, or did you all walk away while I was talking to a shut-off microphone? Please type something in the chat window so I don't feel like an idiot for doubling down on talking to nobody. I'm waiting. Yodeloo. Yo-ha! I can go on like this all day, but I won't. So. Oh, where'd you go? Wrong window opened up. Hello? Hi there. No, that's not it. Here we go. Yes, Elante Mug is still here. It's alive. It's alive. Dang, I ought to drink more Dr. Pepper before I do these shows, man. I don't know if I'm feeling perky, but I'm certainly feeling a lot more active. This is why coffee is so dangerous. You give somebody they show these people they're blurry and dreary and they're saying they're dragging themselves to the counter and they drink that first cup of coffee, ding, and they're all smiling and cheering. No, they're not. Not in real life. They're in just the same bad mood they were before. They just have more energy to go with it. Just ponder that one. You are here, and over in the upper right corner, yeah, that's where we sent your luggage. Okay. Elanti Mug, MDGBG, Majibiji, Mr. Cartoon Critic, here for the really, really big show. Nobody knows that accent, so funny that everybody recognizes this one. Hello. This is Peter Lorre speaking. You want to depress the hell out of yourself. Just do some imitations of famous celebrities from your childhood and see your children and nephews and nieces stare at you blankly. Is that Kermit the Frog? No, get out of my face, kid. Oh, I will admit, I probably dragged out the argument way too long about that whole topic in that story, but I've got a bad habit of doubling down on issues. Personally, I found it rather interesting the idea that society could be put in a place where it had to become more sexually conservative without having to resort to a nationwide, you know, mission field evangelistic effort. We forget that most people, most of the things that we call moral issues are also matters of practicality and common sense. I wish I was sure when exactly I turned off the microphone. And I wish I knew for sure when I turned it off because I don't know how far back to take my conversation. I don't know if I could call this a conversation. My monologue, blogalog, Yule log, sploosh. Okay, current shipping. Okay, obviously Taylor and Bailey are together. I'm also thinking of. Did I mention Manita and Sue, the frog girl, Froppy? The grape-haired kid and Sue, the frog girl. Because, like I said, they're going to find out they have a lot more in common. Sue has been forced to circumstances to be a stand-in mother for her younger brother and sister, while which made her life a lot harder because she was too busy. She didn't have time to socialize or be friends, or do those things that a young girl normally does just to develop socially. And she already had the problem that she looks like a frog, a cute frog, but she still looks like she's got a deadpan face, and it was off-putting to the other kids, and so she had trouble making friends, and she's very she's this is why she's so eager to have anybody call her by her first name, Suyu. Her last name is Asui. But in Japanese culture, it takes a certain degree of familiarity and friendship before you call somebody by their first name, much more than in Western society. And the way she goes around always telling everybody, "Call me Sue," is because she's jumping ahead. She wants to accept them as friends, just eager for it, desperate for it. But her having to be a mom, a substitute mom because both her parents are working, has left her socially high and dry up until she joined UA. And Manita, he's a lonely little guy too because he was well, look, he's a dwarfish, weird looking little guy with kind of gross quirk that makes big balls grow on his head that he can pop off. It's kind of yeah, that and so you can imagine if you can imagine how Midoriya was bullied when he was in school. You can imagine that Manita was bullied just as bad, if not worse. And plus, he's my assumption is that Fanon, on my part, that he comes from a broken home. His father's divorced, or rather, his mother ran out on them. Took his father for everything. Took him to the cleaners in the divorce court. Left him a broken, embittered man who has to resort to drawing hentai comics to pay the bills for so he can take care of his son. and Manita growing up in that environment, toddler walking around, and there's pictures of naked women all over the place that have been freshly inked and drying. Probably, and having his mom abandon him, and generally that affected how Manita views and treats women now. Now, links to lists of stories I like. Well, I can't find any place where I can just crank out a list. I have to go and pick. Find a link here, find a link there, find a link everywhere. Let's see. Let me see if I got it. I can still browse archive it. I just can't do anything with my files on there. I can't even answer forum questions or email. I can't even put up a notice that says I'm banned for a couple of jerks. And let's see here. Works, drafts, series, bookmarks, collections, inbox, subscriptions. Okay. Okay. There's a bunch of them here. I can't even remember what most of these are. Most of these I've been waiting for updates for ages. Well, there's yesterday, ones that really stand out to me. Yesterday Upon the Stair. It's a completed work. The idea is that Izuku did have a quirk, but nobody would believe him when he was a kid, and he had to keep it to himself. He basically, he can see dead people. Makes the whole story a whole lot more interesting. And he's even got this one little ghost girl that follows him around. When he was a little bitty boy, she acted as his big sister. She stayed the same age, of course, but she's always looking out for him. Yesterday Upon the Stair by Pit Viper of Doom. Let's see. When All You Have Is a Hammer. What is this one about? Oh, yes. When All You Have Is a Hammer is one by Flitty. Flitty. It's basically that Izuku discovers he has a quirk. He has the power to change from a boy to a girl and back. And the thing of it is that he leverages it. He discovers all sorts of little details and side effects about how his power works. So he or she is able to use it to do things like, among other things, store things in a hyperspace pocket, or teleport across the room. It's one of. Then there's What's in a Horde, where Izuku is descended from dragons. Titus 621. What's in a Horde? This is the one where Izuku befriends Shoto and they become vigilantes. Because they encounter a couple of Japanese spirits that grant them power. It's a little odd. Let's see. There's one here. It's called Ultrasonic by It's a crossover between Zootopia and Miraculous Ladybug. Don't ask me how they make that work. I wish more people would print a summary. There's a lot of these that I just picked up as I went. Now, there's one here. Here's one that stands out. It's called The Saint and the Sinner. The idea is that Izuku in school, when he's a little bitty sprout, makes friends with another kid who's an outcast. Guess who? Manita. And he so inspires Manita that Manita basically becomes his loyal sidekick. It's an ongoing story. Last time it updated was the 5th of January. It's got 27 chapters, makes a good read. And so it's a story. It's basically about Izuku. Manita is determined that Izuku is going to be the greatest hero ever, and he's going to be the sidekick along the side. And basically, it's written from Manita's perspective, and he's trying to be a better person the whole way. Let's see. There's one called The One Where Izuku's Quirk Sucks by John Cribati, Cribati. Basically, if I remember the whole of the story correctly, Izuku basically ends up with Kirby's powers. Let's see. This one only has 5 chapters, and it updated this month on the 6th. I'll have to check this one out. Hey. That's the problem with these subscriptions. Archive of Our Own doesn't really. The update thing is kind of. Uh, and let's see. There's a lot of stories. I like Wyvern. Wyvern. Look it up. It's where Taylor Hebert. Basically, she turns into a dragon. When waiting for an update on it. The guy's like me. The author is like me. He's got like a cajillion stories that are all sort of sitting there idling, waiting for a then there's it's neither a bird nor a plane. It's Deku by Fox on Pie. It's basically Izuku Midoriya is Kal-El, the last son of Krypton. Let's see. Of quirks and magic as Harry Potter ends up in My Hero Academia. There's another story. Let's see if I can remember where it is. No, wait. Mystic Motor. Let's see. No. It's of Quirks and Magic. This is the one where Midoriya becomes Doctor Strange's apprentice. 51 chapters. It updated last June the 28th. Long wait. Ooh, now Quirk Sequencer. That's a very interesting one. God knows where it's going to go, though. Basically, Midoriya has the power to. He doesn't have the power to duplicate other people's quirks. But if he gets a sample of their DNA, if he a drop of their blood or one of their hairs or whatever, and ingests it, he can take two quirks and combine them into a new one. And it's a very fascinating, it's the system he uses is very fascinating to read. How he goes about what he does, now and how he's struggling to keep it hidden. It's a fairly fun read. It's about 12 chapters. Last updated April 18th of last year. I've probably got ones that old at least that need updating, so I'm not going to say too much. Rain Dancer by Terath, Terath. It's where Izuku gets a water telekinetic power. He grows up in Chibu. He grows up with Kirishimu, Ashida, and Kendo as his friends. He's got a quirk that lets him produce, control, and become water. Living liquid. And let's see, 18 chapters. May 17th of 2019. It's been that long since they updated. Sheep Go to Heaven. This is a strange one by Dramatic Spoon. Dramatic underline spoon. Sheep Go to Heaven. Well, basically, Izuku has a quirk. He can turn into a sheep. You heard me. He can turn into a sheep. It's a completed story. That's and his childhood goes a little bit better because the first time he activates his powers at school, Kachan makes fun of him, but all the little girl goes, "Oh, he's so cute," and he's just he's a little bitty lamb at that point. So. I'm not kidding you. I have 4 pages of links. Most of them just waiting to update. Let's see. Midoriya, his quirk is cat-like reflexes. The story is called Reflex by Tired Diver. Again, hasn't updated since December 15th of last year. But 26 chapters, solid read. I think that's enough of a list to get you started. I hope. Yeah, fanfic junkies. Yeah. Would I read any of these? Oh yeah. Oh yeah. That's right. I've been talking about doing story reading again. Well, it's yippee ki yay! Might as well. I'm going to save that for tomorrow. It's already been 3 hours. It's 11:30 at night. Some of us might need to sleep. So, okay. Where do you go? Well, if you want to see the latest updates of my stories, go to either Sufficient Velocity or Space Battles, and just look for RHJunior. You'll have to chug a look through the links to find, dig around through the links to find my latest thread marks or my threads. But there you go. Okay. As always, I want to thank you all for your support and your friendship and your donations. If you'd like to make a donation or like to make a contribution or just keep me alive, just in my slow, lingering decline into decrepitude. It's a race to see whether I'll fall apart or my house will first. So, I've got a PayPal link at www.rhjunior.com. I also have a Patreon at www.patreon.com/rhjunior. And I also have a Ko-fi. Do you pronounce that Ko-fi, Ko-fi, or coffee? Ko-fi.com. Just buy me a coffee. It takes a little $3 donation. It makes like a $3 donation, and away you go. ko-fi.com/rhjunior. Yay. I also take commissions, sell books, sell this, sell that. So if you feel like, please toss a penny in the old man's hat. Okay. I will see you all later. I will see you tomorrow night, in fact. Let's make it a point. I'm going to try and have at least a 2-hour show every night. Goals. You have to set goals. You have to set goals in order to fulfill goals. So the goal